finally here. You finally arrived. You've at last found the one place which holds the answers to the questions of the ages. You're excited. Your heart palpitates. Is it real? Can it be true? You're understandably hesitant, yet determinedly hopeful. That is good. Your faith in such matters will be rewarded. You'll not find pat and cliched answers here, no! Here is a place of clarity, of definition, of explanation, of truth. Here combines science and religion, removes tradition and replaces it with fact. Here the universe is holographic, yet tangible, ethereal, yet substantive. Here is a place where time is understood as atemporal. Here there is harmony amidst chaos. Here is where the darkened glass is finally cleared. Here is where you'll find the answers to all the unanswered questions which stretch across the cosmos.
And you are across the cosmos for the next hour. My name is Chase Rockwell, and I am your host. I am joined in studio once again by my co-hosts,
Lou Rogers,
Mark Wilson,
and David Cameron.
Last week we discussed the subject of near-death experiences, or NDEs. It's a fascinating topic, and we last left off discussing the light, the peace, the euphoria that surrounds so many when they enter into this near-death state, or perhaps an actual death state, depending upon whose accounts you're hearing from, and the medical histories behind each and every one of those people. Some of these human beings actually did suffer a clinical death, and there's no way to get around that. They are walking medical miracles if they're still alive, or if they lived with any cognizance after their episode. So regardless how the medical field may look at this, their explanations of hypoxia or hallucinations resulting from the dying brain simply are not supported by the medical facts. Many of these people who had claimed that they saw things had no brain function by which to restore or retain or even process memory. They were, in fact, dead. But there's a flip side to this coin, and that's what we're going to discuss in this second half of the discussion on near-death experiences. We last left off, as I said, talking about essentially heaven, but what about the other side of that coin? What about those who have gone into hell?
There's this book called 23 Minutes in Hell.
by Bill Weiss, yeah.
And his experience is somewhat different.
Might be Bill Weiss.
But why such a disparity?
There have been a lot of NDEs regarding hell, but if you look at the percentage as to how many are about hell or a hellish or scary experience, as opposed to how many are of a beautiful, non-judgmental, exhilarating experience, it's probably less than 20%. Probably even less than that. But 23 Minutes of Hell is not an NDE story. And most people...
Okay, I'll confess, I've not read this particular book. I've heard about it, not read it.
Well, he's waiting for his wife, and he's in his living room as I read the book. And so it's called 15 Minutes in... Is it 13 or 15? 23 Minutes in Hell.
23 Minutes in Hell.
I forget how many minutes it was. Anyway, it's because as he was waiting, he was in the living room, and he said he, I guess, fell down, went into a trance like he was dead. And he experienced this hellish episode. So what he was saying was that the spirit took him to hell and showed him what hell was like. And the pictures he paints of these incredibly huge, first of all, we're talking Goliath-sized demons compared to a human, that are massive and powerful and despicably ugly. And how brutal they are, and the pit or the holding cell you're put in, and then how he was directed around by them, and they'd push him and knock him to the ground, and they really didn't care. And as he glanced around underneath this cavernous area, which he called hell, he noticed demons clutching the sides of the walls and ceiling that were grotesque and, thin and sinewy and really ugly looking. Clamped onto the walls, and then he was shown this lake of fire in which tormented souls were in there, and there was shrieking. And you should read the book. It's an interesting read. The problem...
It's not true NDE. It's an out-of-body experience.
It was...
Well, for our readers, what's the difference?
His was a vision.
Or our listeners, what's the difference between an NDE
Well,
and an
NDE
out-of-body
and
experience?
out-of-body experience, one can be actually contrived, the other one cannot.
Well-
A lot of people can put themselves into a situation where they will actually bring about an out-of-body experience, and from that you get a lot of this astral projection type situations.
Correct.
You've got Hindus, and
Well-
you've got different
I'll be honest,
Buddhist monks, and you've got South American, African, what do you call it? I don't want to use the word shaman. Okay, that do that all the time.
Yeah.
In the Revelation, John did it. I was on the island of Patmos, and immediately I was in the Spirit on the Lord's Day. So he was having a vision. So what this particular gentleman had was a vision. It wasn't an NDE. He didn't have a heart attack, wasn't dying, wasn't rushed to the hospital. He had a vision, and he came back with this vision of hell for the purpose of teaching people to hell's real. To avoid, the bottom line, hell's real, avoid hell. Well, the huge problem I have with it is that whoever showed him that doesn't understand language.
Okay, but could he have just simply? I mean, this is a derivative of, for example, Dante's hell.
It pretty much,
Maybe a little bit of John Milton.
yeah. But see, the whole concept is wrong and erroneous. So whatever angel showed him this didn't understand his history. So
So Angel didn't understand history.
it must not have
Well,
understood
that's what
history.
well, the angel understood it. It was there for it.
Or
Well-
it was a deception.
It's,
Wait a second.
you either have
I'm sorry, but I'm trying to struggle with an angel not understanding.
you either have
history.
Avery the absent-minded angel on the one hand, or on the other hand, what do you have?
Waiting for the bell to ring to get its wings.
Well, it's
my understanding of the spiritual realm in that regard is that it's kind of like when we used to do structural repair. If we've done structural repair properly, it looks like we were never there to begin with. If we screw it up, then we go down in history as,
There's a
you can
seam.
see everything. And an angel who's doing the will of God the Father isn't going to make himself known unless that's a directive from God the Father. Otherwise,
well, he believes it is, and that's why he was
well,
given this
I understand
vision.
that, but how easily can we be deceived by lying spirits? So we get all sorts of admonitions throughout the New Testament, primarily from Paul, to tell us to be wary of these things. So my struggle with there's no way that I think that an angel doesn't understand their history. I think that they're deceiving spirits.
Yeah, his story is, obviously he had some kind of a happening. Obviously he had some kind of a vision. There's either two possibilities. He's lying or something happened.
No, I believe something happened.
So let's say something happened. The problem with the something happening is that he and the supposed angel that showed him this doesn't understand history, doesn't understand the words, and doesn't understand what's going on. So what he's saying is the sensationalism of his, just like people say with their NDEs, no, you people out there don't understand what's going on. Here's what's really happening. Well, by him using the term hell, I knew immediately it was wrong. Because that's not a term found in the original languages. It's just simply morphed into that today. So you could say, okay, well, the angel was using a vernacular that we can comprehend and understand.
Which might be true.
Well, so he puts it into a cavern with a lake of fire under the ground. I guess that can work on one, in one aspect that could possibly work. But when he takes these demons...
But wait a minute, we have a problem because the lake of fire and hell, even if you adhere to
Strict orthodoxy.
Orthodox Church, the lake of fire and hell are two different things because in the book of Revelation, hell is cast into the lake of fire.
Well, he's
so
saying-
we're talking about two different areas.
Well, he's saying that it was in the cavern itself, this massive cavern. So
That must be a really big hole.
it was, and it was a huge cavern. But the problem is he's propagating a Dante's Inferno
That was my
Exactly.
agenda as opposed to reality. And that's what I don't like. Once you start saying there's these demons, clinging onto the walls that look grotesque, well, you don't understand what demons are, and they're not in that form at all. That's not the form they're cursed into. He doesn't understand what they are. And what happens is you have a church with certain doctrines, and this is what they believe.
but can you not give room for the fact that a demonic entity can manifest in a particular shape, for example?
Of course they can.
For those who have encountered the physicality of a demonic entity, they'll tell you they come in lots of different shapes, that they have been beastly-looking creatures, small little cat-like creatures, shadows that are moving in your peripheral vision.
Science would call
and
those a
angels of light.
manifestation of
I know,
biology.
I understand all
Your
of that.
brain is creating those images. The Southern Baptist
Well,
Convention, for instance,
science may call that, but science could never explain how my car keys could move from my kitchen into a bedroom that I had not walked into for 24 hours, and I was the only person in the house.
they would explain it by that you did it without knowing. That's their.
I know they would,
They will
but-
find this just like water takes the
Sure.
simplest path downward. They'll find the simplest result to your
Except
question.
we're talking about a room that I hadn't gone into for over a year because I had no reason to go into the room.
But getting back to this 28, is it
23
23 minutes? Okay,
Keeps getting longer.
longer or shorter? If he
Really
seriously,
must suck.
if he seriously,
Well, it is supposed to be an eternity.
if he's seriously sincere about this, and let's say he is, we'll take away the monetary aspect. And
I
we'll
would
take
assume
away
he is.
the popularity aspect and the being able to go around churches and have authority. People love that. Let's take that and push it off the table. Let's just look at the vision. So if you're saying it's 28 minutes in hell so that you can go back.
You added 5 minutes to it.
That's 23.
23.
23 minutes in hell so that you can go back and tell people to avoid hell. And
That's
how
because
do you
we
do
forgot
that?
to hit the record button.
By
So
getting the gospel out to them in a more aggressive way. That hell's real. We're told in this world that science attacks both heaven and hell, and for a lot of Christian denominations, they hold on to hell with both hands and all their might.
Well, yeah, because
it's
that's
funny.
That's the stick.
hell
the
is more
carrot.
important than heaven.
Well,
Hell is the billy club to get you saved.
right. It appears
crazy.
It appears that a lot of Christians believe more in hell than they do in heaven because they can't get free. They can't get free from it.
When a Christian professor told me once, very seriously, Mark, he said that Jesus taught more about hell than heaven. I didn't say a word. I just realized over his head because Jesus talked about Gehenna, and he had no clue what Gehenna was, and most people don't, since it was translated hell in the English, King James English. They totally missed the point of what Jesus was teaching. They have no clue. So it wasn't about to get into it with them. He, and like another guy I was talking to about a man in this room, this person said this individual is a heretic and he's going to go to hell. Isn't he afraid of going to hell? And I said, it's like he kept talking about hell and hell and hell. And if you do this, you're going to hell. If you do this, you're going to hell. And I realized he was more concerned about hell than about heaven. It was almost like heaven is the maybe, hell's the certainty for everybody.
There's no doubt about that.
And it's like
Right.
it's,
That's right.
it's like I'm going, what is going on here? So when he gave this, when I read this 23 Minutes of Hell, it's a scary book. But when you get into it and you understand truth, and they'll say, yeah, from your perspective, but when you understand truth, it couldn't be. Places are mixed up, words are mixed up, and functions are mixed up. So I look at that and say, okay, he saw something. But all of this, like the Southern Baptist Convention feels, could be induced into the mind by a demon.
Oh, there's no doubt. Have you ever read Dante's Divine Comedy?
Not the whole
The
thing.
whole thing? No, and I haven't. I plotted
kinda
through
hard
some of
to.
it, but when I got to the hell aspect, understand that Dante is being taken on this trip
Joyride.
by an atheist philosopher named Virgil.
Yeah.
Which I always thought was an interesting bit of irony, and I don't know how many academicians catch it. That you're taking a religious
Journey by an
journey
atheist.
being brought there by an atheist. In today's vernacular, it'd be like being given a tour of heaven or hell by what's his name, Dyson, Neil deGrasse Tyson, you know, or Stephen Hawking, or Richard Dawkins.
Richard Dawkins would be better.
And it's lost on modern academia because, of course, they think it's all a contrivance anyway, which it was. It was a story, but yeah, that stuff seeps into your brain, and if a lot of that imagery is there, and he borrowed almost wholesale from the ancient Greeks.
Well, let's face it, almost all of us in the Western civilization, at one point or another as a young child, asked mom or dad, what's hell? And you get the fire and brimstone. If you didn't go to church, you get the fire and brimstone routine, because that's what they were given, because that's what their parents were given. Yeah, and we just keep passing this information down because it's become ingrained.
Yeah, well, at some point or another, we got to sober up.
Well, there was another NDE I was reading about how, as his heart was being massaged, you know, they're doing heart to heart, or mouth to mouth and heart massage, he would gasp and say, "Don't let me die, don't let me die." And when he came to, he said he had an intense NDE about hell. And so you take these and you look at them, and you have to say, okay, we must include these. You have to include them into the picture.
But do you?
I
say this. I say this only for this reason. It was sometime back in the late 1960s that most, and it was even before that, but I believe they codified it into essentially what they regard as law amongst the medical community, that they didn't regard death as taking place when a heart was stopped. Mm-hmm. They began to understand that cessation of life occurred when brain death occurred. Mm-hmm. And so because we've taken hearts out, we put people on artificial pumps, etc.
Well, people die for heart transplants.
Dead. So because the brain can continue. And so a person being revived through artificial respiration, heart massage, etc., they may pass out of consciousness, but I wouldn't liken that to a near-death experience per se. And the reason is because, especially if they're going in and out of consciousness, even when I took first aid, we're taught that that's going to happen, and they emphasize that, yeah, the chances of them waking up from that are slim because you've got this erratic flow of blood for the moment. But the primary motivation here is to keep the blood oxygenated enough so that the brain doesn't suffer any damage. Yeah, they'll go unconscious, and in that unconscious state where there's trauma to the body, there's going to be a lot of stuff going on. But when you have connotations of like you said with this gentleman in 23 Minutes of Hell, what's his name? I forget his name. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
Bill Weiss.
Yeah, that's right. That there's imagery or hallucinations, if you will, I have no problem with. But like you're saying, you dismissed it when he started bringing up these different traditional descriptions of hell. Mm-hmm. And that account, to me, impressed me the same way. It's like, he's bringing up stuff that doesn't fit.
That's just ingrained, and he's embellishing, whether he's intending to,
but also
on a
the mere
conscious
fact
level
that
or
he
not.
keeps waking up and going back and waking up and going back.
Right.
Well, there's other NDEs that have had hellish experience.
I understand that, and that's why I wanted to explore it here.
Right. We can't be so critical of their NDEs and then not critical of all of the positive ones. Everyone wants a positive message.
But I do like consistency.
Yeah.
If you don't have consistency, then there's a problem. And while orthodoxy would love to believe that there is a slim slice of humanity that is good enough that Jesus Christ will hold them in his arms for eternity, the majority of us, he thinks, are scum, and that we deserve every sting of pain that the flames of hell will inflict upon our flesh, or our spiritual flesh. And not only that, these types encourage it.
Well, and I would say that when you look at the percentage, that most of the near-death experiences are of the light side rather than the hell side. That tells me a little something. I mean, in that because the church would say that few are going to heaven and most are going to hell.
Well,
So you would think that there would be more. I would think, not knowing everything, I would think that there would be more of the going to hell experiences, and that's not the case.
Which is why conventions such as the Southern Baptist Convention would say that it's demonically inspired. So basically, if you look at this, and you look at all the potential NDEs that could happen in a year throughout the world, with how many millions dying in 1 year, or how many millions having near-death experiences in 1 year, whether they're cognizant or not, you'd have to have a heck of a lot of demons visiting all these places to put into these people's minds these NDEs. So science would say, okay, let's forget about demons totally. Let's forget about God totally and heaven and hell. We're saying it's a manufactured biological situation. Your brain is secreting a chemical that stimulates a certain part of your brain that allows you to have this supposed vision. To you, it's as real as can be, but it's not real at all.
That's great, but the EEGs tend to show no brain function at all while this is taking place.
Well, and again, in the case of Edom Alexander, that's exactly what the readouts that he examined. There was nothing at all going on there.
Right.
And very little, and even his brainstem.
Now, Alexander's case is remarkable for the reasons we had discussed, which is he was not only a professional, but a top professional in his field.
And he wasn't particularly a believer.
Yeah, not at all. And on this particular disease, he was very well aware. He'd be the one you call.
He was exactly the one who would have been the expert on hand.
Now, what he came back with is something I'm starting to see that more people are talking about. Reading all the ones I have, of course, they're the more sensational ones come out in books. However, for every NDE that's promoted out there through a book or now on the internet, it's easier. There's probably 10 that aren't. Because a lifetime's a long time. You might have an NDE at 6, in the year 1952, and by the time you're 75 years old, who cares? So there's an aspect that he even brought out that I've heard repeatedly, and that is that we knew about our life before.
Yes, and I keyed in on that. That was interesting to me.
So,
because that follows into this eternal aspect of our construct.
As we talked about, when does the human life begin? The reason abortion is such a hot issue is because we know, just as we understand that when the heart stops, there's still life for X amount of minutes until there's brain death. We also know that because of modern science, that life doesn't begin when the baby takes its first breath. The baby's alive and well in the womb for several months prior to that. We know that now through technology. So there's no question that life begins earlier than we thought. So, in history, it was told the first breath.
We know that babies start showing brain function at somewhere around, I believe, 8 to 10 weeks.
Let alone the reality of individual consciousness.
Okay, so when you take that picture, we realize that life begins in the womb far earlier than we had assumed. We have another problem. When does the spirit or the consciousness come into the person? From a religious standpoint, you're into an area that you cannot figure out. It's impossible. Because you're left with, well, God shoots it in there with a ray or sends it down through some way, this consciousness into your head, or you have to admit, like the scientist would, that's mechanistic in foundation, and that is no, it just, there is no spirit, you're just a biological entity that has evolved.
There's enough disproof of that. Science has proved that basically we have a spirit. There's been times where people have died and their body weight has been taken before they die and after they die, and they lose ounces.
And as they
it's actually
and some of that
3 grams or something. I forget
some of that is the oxygen leaving the lungs. I mean,
I forgot the weight, but it's some tiny amount.
Right, it's a tiny amount, but still, even with the volume of the lungs, if they were at full capacity when weighed and then emptied afterwards, it doesn't equal the volume or the weight amount
For those
that
of you
leaves the
unaware,
body.
they actually have done tests where they put the person who signed a consent form, they put the dying person into a capsule that's a very sensitive instrument for weighing, so that everything inside there is weighed prior to and during, and when the person expires, they notice there's a difference in weight.
And they took in account the air,
Everything's
and the
taken
lungs,
into account.
and right, and the muscle, whatever.
So that therefore,
tension.
not even a hair can fall off your head onto the floor because you're inside this capsule when you expire. Every tiny nuance of what's possible to weigh is taken into consideration, and there is a difference in weight. But can we go back to that about?
You're driving. I'm just in the passenger seat.
Oh no! If we can go back to that aspect where Eben knew he was alive before, and
yeah, that
yes,
was one of the
let's get
things
back
that
there.
that interested me because of this pre-existent, if you want to call it a paradox, where with respect to eternity. Eternity is an interesting word. Eternity, even in Strong's concordance, which gives, for those unfamiliar with Strong's, every Bible student would know this. You can cross-reference words in Greek and Hebrew, trace down the meanings that were prevalent, at least at the time, at the usage of the translation. Eternity is one of those words that falls into what's called atemporal. It knows no time. By definition, therefore, you could be pre-existent as well as everlasting. And so when Christ talks about us coming with him into eternity, there's a connotation attached to that, which too many believe just means everlasting, that from this point forward you will continue on with him into infinity, or like a ray in geometry, which has a fixed point and then an arrow going off in one direction, never ending. But that's not what eternity is. Eternity is more like a closed circle with no discernible beginning or end. So then we wind up in this paradox situation because we're stuck in linear time. And traversing time is difficult. Physicists will say that we can jump ahead here, maybe even go back a little bit. Nothing at all worth any real consequence. If you're being able to jump ahead a millisecond or go back a millisecond, it's of what consequence? The necessary power or ability, and you're playing around with photons for the most part anyway. So I'm going to put that aside for the moment and just focus on this eternal aspect. How could he know that we pre-existed our corporeal selves within this linear time frame?
Well, what he addressed is what others are addressing, and that is they're becoming aware that the body is temporal, and you come into what's called a space-time continuum.
Sure.
And we experience birth, aging, and finally death, but the spirit is eternal to begin with.
Which is how it's described.
Which is really strange, because we were taught and kind of force-fed, both from science and from religion, that we came into existence at a certain point of time, because we're looking at it through a temporal, physical realm, with physical lenses. We can only conceive of time. We can't conceive of existence without time.
Sure.
And so what he was saying is that the body is just a vessel to be used for while we're in this span of time.
Exactly.
And then you return. Now the question comes then, what about reincarnation? Because if you get into some of the Eastern, the Hindu religions, other Eastern religions, they believe that you occupy a body and then you continually occupy some sort of a body, whether it's a snail, a rabbit, a human, a lion, through a series of lifetimes,
Sure,
until you achieve karma.
Well, I want to jump in right here and separate Eastern views of reincarnation and Western views of reincarnation.
they are different.
They are extremely different. And I'm doing this not for us, but for our listeners. And the simple fact is, in the Western view, we tend to look at, oh, I'll get to come back as another person. I'll get to come back as this.
Yeah, Western view really is more based upon wishful thinking than any concrete
And the human vehicle.
teaching.
Very much so. The Eastern view is you are trapped here, and you are trying to get out of this place. And each step is supposed to be a gradual step to becoming more one with the universe.
Well, yeah, and that's mostly prevalent in Buddhism.
Correct.
And in between the instances of life, you are in a penalty box, for lack of a better term. I forget the name of what they call it, but it's a limited hell with a defined period of time, and it's based upon your behavior here. But it's more of a
we get
discipline.
into the Chinese
situation
versions of hell,
where you're supposed to take essentially a timeout and then let's try this again, and
Right.
then you step up.
and
until
have you
eventually
learned
reach
your
nirvana.
lesson, and eventually you get to be an amoeba that gets taken out by an antibiotic, and then you're one with the universe.
But I tend to adhere primarily or more with the author of Hebrews outline and some of what Paul said in Romans. We're here for once, and then it's done. I personally don't subscribe to a reincarnation model because it doesn't have any consistency to it with what Christ was wanting to teach us. Right. I think that we have our journey through this time, that there's a purpose for it, which is only barely hinted at and is still a mystery to me. It is, however, one of the primary motivations that I have with respect to the pro-life movement. And I hold to that pro-life view irrespective of the development. I am not for the institutionalized killing by the state. I think that there's other solutions, and we've already pretty much applied them. Retributive justice doesn't do much for me. I realize that it
We should do a subject on abortion.
well, and I intend to in the time goes on. But when one becomes so flippant and blasé with life that they'll consign the majority of their fellow human beings to what they pound on the pulpit is a fiery, unbearable place of hell, and they'll just that is the religion of meism. These are people who preach meism.
Very much so.
Everything is about them. Their soft little pasty behinds are saved, and screw all of you. I got mine.
And they even decide others in their
Yes,
congregation.
they are the arbiters.
They decide when they've lost it. Well, you didn't make it. You finally, this is it, and I've got to tell you, we have to shun you or whatever their theology is.
And so that's what I regard as the motivations, for example, with the Southern Baptist Convention putting the stays on stuff like NDEs, because ultimately it takes them out of the driver's seat. If all of a sudden there is revelation coming that says, you know what, you guys, we were wrong. God can speak to the Spirit. God can come down and show you wonders, as He promised would happen in the Scriptures. But we would rather you not, because if you go that route, then of course you have no need for us.
There's so much I'm starting to realize we don't know. And for us to make, huge concrete walls and say within these walls is the sum total of all knowledge, I think it's just being children. With NDEs, we are looking into something that we can't put a fence around. We don't know. We will all find out when we die. And thankfully we all do
find
die.
out a lot of stuff when we'll die. But
Thankfully we die. But
I'm not going to be doing the show when I'm there.
But we
we can
learn.
try, but I don't think it'll work.
So I think the critical aspect is if we're
You
going
can
to know
try.
truth then, if we're going to know truth when we die, if we won't see through a glass darkly, through murky waters, and we'll know truth, then being here on this earth, knowing the truth, isn't as critical as I once thought it was. And one thing that the NDEers come back with, as far as what's the most important thing you've learned, you know what it is?
Love.
Not truth, it's
Love.
Loving others.
Let me ask you something. Now, because of our little technological slip up a little bit ago, I want to circle around back and give some closure or resolution to our listeners with respect to the two people we spoke about earlier who had, who you'd spoken on with their NDEs, and that would be Karen and Schmitty. So, in both cases, they passed on.
Yeah.
And it was, I don't know how long it was with Smitty. Is it
I don't
Smitty
know.
or
I don't
Schmitty?
know.
Smith.
Smitty. I thought I'm going to say I don't know for sure, but I'm going to an educated guess is 5-6 years.
And it was just a heart attack again?
I don't remember.
Stroke, bus.
Pardon me?
Bus? Over a cliff?
He wasn't
That
crossing
happens
the street.
sometimes.
Bus hit him.
No, I think he died more of his body where it wore out or a heart attack. Yeah, I don't remember.
In other words, we don't know.
I don't know.
Sometimes
I'd have
people
to-
die
I'd
because
have
the
to
bus
ask.
they're on goes
I'd
over
have
a
to
cliff.
ask his wife or his ex-wife, or his wife.
His ex-wife.
His wife. Well, whatever.
Oh, well, I suppose that could something be appropriate. All right. So anyway, it was a few years.
It was definitely a few
And
years.
in the duration of time, his personality pretty much was consistent up until he died. He was the trained. He was Scrooge after
Exactly.
the
It was
vision.
exactly like Ebenezer Scrooge. That's what it's consistent.
Right, and yeah, he didn't go back to his old. He stayed very pliable, very soft, very kind, very gentle, had a lot of joy. Look forward to life. Look forward to death. He wasn't worried.
It was a positive experience.
Yes.
Even
Very much
amidst,
so.
even amidst the chaos of the initial illness and trial and what have you, it was
Even when he
positive
had,
change.
even when he had pastors and teachers that had been over him for years, telling him different things, he still hung on to what he knew.
Well, yeah, I mean, I suppose if your perspective is, you guys don't know anything. I was there. What the hell can you teach me?
He wasn't,
You can't
but
find-
he didn't. But I'm going to tell you, he didn't have that attitude.
I get that. That's my attitude.
Many people in really strongly, fundamental religious circles, when they have an NDE, they either don't speak about it, or if they do, they're pretty much told that they're tolerated to a degree, but eventually it's like you had a demonic experience.
Yeah.
A demon visited you, or a bad angel and gave you a bad vision, because it doesn't.
So like getting a bad bit of potato or something.
Yeah. So
Just a
what's
little
happened
bit.
A
is
spot of bad
is
mustard.
here you experience this wonderful adventure, then you're told that it was a demonic or a devilish experience, and now you're like, oh shoot, what do I do? How do I know it's real? So you either walk away from the church or you cling to the church and you get demons knocked out of you, get exorcised. That's what a lot of people do.
You knock demons? Have you knocked demons? What weight bat do you use?
Yeah.
But what do you do if you're a Southern Baptist and you're vehemently opposed to
What
this?
do I do? I run
And then you have an NDE.
in the opposite direction as fast as
What
I
do you do with the
possibly
NDE?
can.
Well, and
They just don't know any better.
Yeah, they don't know, and we've brought up the one side of it is that with the pastors, the teachers, the theologians, what happens is they lose some control maybe because someone is saying, "Hey, it's okay, we're gonna." But it also, I know other pastors that have said, "Oh well, I know you had." That I know you, and yes, you're saved, and yeah, you had a great experience, but not everybody does. So,
Not only is it they lose a little bit of that because the person that's gone through it says, "Look, I've been through that. There's an overwhelming abundance of love for me, and for anyone else that passes on." They not only lose that aspect, but the people that go through these NDEs tend to look at the things that the church calls important as trivial, such as, no, it doesn't matter whether we have a new building. It doesn't matter if we have new carpet. It doesn't matter if the pastor gets a raise, because none of that means crap to God.
right, this realm is put in perspective when they experience, paradise or heaven. This realm gets put in perspective, and you and I both agree that I don't believe this realm means as much as we think. Now, there is an importance to it,
Sure,
and
it
we're
has-
here
it has
for
a
a
point.
reason. I don't want to say it doesn't mean anything, but
Well, religion teaches, by and large, that we are trying to be good enough to get to this heaven or this paradise. That we have to perform in a certain way to be accepted or to be looked upon and chosen.
Sure, if God
Okay.
can reject his own
So,
son on the cross,
what they're
turn
saying-
away because he couldn't stand looking at him because he was covered with sin, and how that possibly can work is beyond me.
was quoting Psalms.
I just
Well, there's
Let me go back to
a whole
that.
bunch of things. They
What I'm saying
took
is
out
that
of context there.
what's projected to humanity from a religious standpoint is that it's all about God. The earth is all about God. The devil corrupted it. The demons screwed it up too. The fallen angels further screwed things up. So you got this bad situation going on. But it's really all about God. And if you are good enough, you get to go with him into heaven. What the NDE experiencers are coming back with is it's all about humans. It's all about you learning to love one another, to help one another, to be kind to one another. It's all about you experiencing your life. And as far as the heaven experience goes, that's a normal, natural process of passing on. Death is not as big a deal as we make it.
Sure.
We make it into this massive fear factor.
because we've been inculcated with this hierarchical structure
Right.
and being
for control and power.
being good enough, by people who are glomming after control and power, and we all know pastors, especially in this haunted community that we reside in, who exist on fear, intimidation, and use hell like a club.
Well,
And I, for one, and this is one of the primary reasons that I like this podcast, am tired of it.
Very much so.
When I was a pastor and I had a youth group, I had some youth that were not conforming. And
What does that mean?
They weren't conforming.
Did you hit him in the head with a Bible, a big heavy one?
To what our senior pastor and I, what we believed, is right and wrong. And I came up against a situation where
I do know.
where a judgment was made, and this is what I was told I was going to do with them, and if I did anything else, I was helping them or attributing to their hellish ways. And
worker of iniquity.
what I saw was two kids off the street that didn't know any better, and I had an opportunity to, help them understand and to help them make better decisions in life. And when it didn't happen quick enough, I was told that you got to get rid of them, and they were run off by somebody else.
Just out of curiosity, what is the lead time on that? Are we looking like 2-3 weeks out, and that's it? We cut them loose?
Well, see, that was my point. It doesn't make any sense, I was told that they put up with it for a year and that they felt they were very patient, And I said, well, how long did it take you to change? How long did it take me to, whatever.
Well,
the point is that...
Wait a second. You asked him how long it took him to change.
Stacking that up to
point
Galatians
is-
5.
He hasn't changed yet.
Yeah, but
And I've known him for 22
my point
years.
is, do you approach it through judgment? Now, I wasn't telling them that it was a okay, right, moral thing that they were doing. I was telling them the truth.
I understand that.
Or do you approach it with a positive attitude that we're going to have an effect? Let's have an effect. Let's pray for them. Let's allow God to work in their life.
God
But
did
when
work in his
man-
life.
When
He
man
got rid of
works in someone's life, they get
God saved them, huh?
God saved him. He got them the hell out of there.
Yeah.
You're funny.
I'm funny? That's the truth. He saved you, too. He got you out of there. Whitewashed tombs? Yes. We know. Yes, we know.
So what else?
So, we've got Smitty. Now, with Karen,
Yeah.
she eventually passed as well,
5 years.
5 years after the fact.
Almost, yeah. Very close to the month.
Now, you and her talked. You talked a lot about the experience. She told you a lot of things which you later then heard from Schmitty as to this whole thing. But she began to, and I don't recall if we said if Schmitty retained his memories of where he was or if they began to fade.
When I talked to him, they were very sharp in his head. But he did say that he felt at that time that he was losing some information. Because a lot of people say it's so real they can remember it 20 or 30 years later. Just other people, it seems to fade.
What I got from him was he was losing some of the details,
right?
But the experience he would never ever let go.
But you recorded or just wrote down?
I recorded Smitty.
What about Karen?
Yeah, I recorded Karen too.
So these are details which are still there, regardless.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, and I'm not saying you need to reveal them or anything, but I mean they're there. Even though, as I understand it, she began to also forget the details of the experience.
Yeah, her problem was her memory, although a lot of her memory came back to the point where she was trusted to drive and so forth. There were little pockets of memory that didn't come back properly.
What does that mean? I know she forgot her youngest kids, right? Or was it even more than that?
No, it was just she wasn't the same. Like Stephanie would say, "It's not my mother. It's not my mother. This is not my mother."
In a good way or a bad way?
She just says she's not the same. There's little quirks about her personality that change. There we find the biology coming into play, that there was a change in personality, as we discussed earlier in the program. But what she wrestled with as time went by was, like most people do, a depression, because you're back here and you don't know why. Many NDEers, when they come back, realize they had somewhat of a decision in this, but they don't know why. They think some incredible plan is going to happen, and then life is just lived, and so they wonder why. And Karen wondered why, and she noticed that arguments between her and her husband got worse and worse because the stresses of spending so much money on doctors and the frustration of her not being able to help with the finances, and so she was in a scenario where arguments happened almost every day, and she felt terrible.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say,
I'm sure
that
she did.
In a way, people become overwhelmed again by this physical realm. When you experience something that's outside of space and time as we know it, and then you come back to it, I think that it could be a very overwhelming thing. And the fact this what we go through in this physical realm can be hard, and those things can more or less cause you to lose memory because you're faced with right now.
Right. It was extremely frustrating to be told that you're going to go back when she didn't want to, and she comes back, and that your life has meaning and purpose. But not knowing the meaning and purpose is very frustrating. We look at Jesus and we understand from our perspective of theology what the kenosis is, the Greek word for the self-emptying of a person. For Jesus, it was self-emptying his godhood, let's say, so that he was like a man more than we realize.
He was a man.
So
he was all man,
what
all God.
was being expressed to us, and it follows with Hebrews. When you go to Hebrews and you read the verses, what is a man that you think of him, or the son of man that you care for him? You made him for a little while lower than the angels, but then exalted him above all names. So we immediately go to Jesus. We immediately say phrases for Jesus. And the writer of Hebrews used that to explain that Jesus was different than an angel. He was not an angel. That's why if you say Jesus was the angel of the Lord, you don't understand what's going on. Jesus was never the angel of the Lord, even in his pre-incarnate state. That's a very divisive type of theology. But what is not connected in those dots is the fact that humans are far different than they understand themselves to be. We have always looked at ourselves as these prone, non-powerful, useless, there's billions of us, entities, and we all hope that God loves us and we get to go to heaven. Whatever your religion is, you hope that you'll have an afterlife. The truth is, what NDEs are coming back with is that you are far more valuable and important and powerful than you realize. The weakness of the human, the frailty of the human, is more or less an exercise in teaching for a purpose that we don't know on this side of our kenosis.
Yeah, and I would agree with that.
Yeah, we don't really understand who we are is what it amounts to.
So we look at a friend or we look at a family member and we can get caustic towards them and we can get tired of them or their personalities can conflict with us and so forth. We don't see eternity when we look at a friend or a family member or a person on the street. We're designed not to see eternity. We're designed to see in the physical realm.
Paul said, though, he would rather that we knew each other by the Spirit and not by the flesh.
Right.
And I think that's what
That's exactly
what he's talking about.
Yeah.
And that's been, I feel like that's been a part of my doctrine and my heart's desire, because it's real difficult. We know each other by the flesh. I know myself by the flesh real well.
The 7.2 billion people that are alive today create a conundrum for a group like the Southern Baptist Convention, because they ascribe to the teaching in the book of Revelation that says the New Jerusalem will come down, and they're going to be a part of it. Yeah. If they toe the line. Now they're about 45 million strong, so I don't know how 45 million is going to fit in that little area. It's 1,500 square miles. It's going to be real
cubic miles, because it's high as well.
Well, I guess you can stack them one on another, but you're going to run into a problem with space. So they're thinking only the really hyper good people.
The problem is they don't think.
They don't understand.
Well, you know what's funny about
where
that?
do we stop with this? I mean, we can get all the way over into only the 144,000 make
right.
it, and you've got to you've got to be good enough to bump off the last guy that's 144,000.
Right. So there's really very little.
If you can bump him off by doing one more good deed than he did,
right.
you get to go to heaven.
No, they included the Jobadites too.
Yeah, that's true.
That allowed more.
Let's circle back to the situation with Karen before we move on, because I just wanted there to be some resolution there. Now, she lived an additional 5 years.
Yeah.
And began to forget some of the details. I don't know to what extent she forgot all the details of her experience, and life pressed in on her, and then she got sick again and finally passed. Mm-hmm. Did you ever have an occasion to talk with her or your kids with respect to why she thought God gave her this extra time?
Oh, during that time that she was recovering, we talked quite often. Then after that, we talked less. But we would talk about it every so often. One of the things that immediately left her, she had real anger in her heart towards me before the first episode of dying. Mm-hmm. She couldn't let go of certain things, and so she had this anger and punitive.
You were her ex-husband, and you screwed up.
Yeah, and this punitive anger towards me.
Well,
so that no matter
like
what
most
I did,
ex-husbands,
no matter what I did or what went down, I deserved it,
yeah.
And I deserve worse. I deserve a lot worse, and so this always was part of our relationship for a number of years. And then after this episode, when she comes back, it was gone. Not that she couldn't remember it.
It just didn't matter.
The anger and the frustration and the punitive nature of getting me back, the revenge, it was all gone. It's like she couldn't even manufacture it if she tried.
There was no need for it anymore.
Right. Because where she went, she realized that there is purpose beyond what we can see, and many times to all things. Like, for instance, she was very frustrated the last 2 years of her life regarding, why am I back here?
I would be too.
I've done nothing. What is it I'm supposed to do? Raise the kids for a few more years? And of course, a lot of the women said yes, to give the kids a better foundation. Okay. So, but she says what am I here for? What am I here for? She doesn't realize that how she was living, she always had this steel trap memory. That's why she could never forget an offense. An offense to her was just as real 10 years prior as it is today. You understand? She couldn't forget somebody doing something bad to her. She held on to it. When she had this experience, she didn't have that attitude anymore. That was taken from her. That iron trap mind that she always relied on now was faulty. But also that desire to hang on to the garbage was gone too. So she lived her last years a little lighter than she was prior to this. Mm-hmm. But also, what people don't realize if they have an NDE and they come back and they feel frustrated is that their exposure to the humans around them in their base of friends, family, and acquaintances, that could be the very purpose they've come back.
Well, we don't give enough emphasis to godly and loving relationships. So we look at that and kind of write it off. Well, that I'm supposed to. But it's real important, and it's real important to everybody.
It's like this one NDA I read about. It was funny but truthful. Is this guy would pass this alcoholic on his way to work, and he used to think the most horrible, go get a job, go get cleaned up, because you can't give him money every single time you see him. And you get tired of seeing him. And when he had his NDE and he comes back, he realizes that man was put in his life for a reason. And it all became clear to him. There's a lot of scenarios that we cross paths with in our life that are there for reasons we cannot see. And Karen's return was greater than just Karen. And that's what NDEers can't really understand yet, is that their return is greater than themselves. It's not just you're being sent back for your own self, which is true. You're being sent back for your exposure to others, many times to teach.
Well, and in this situation here, her legacy, if you want to call it that, or her presence, is being shared with a lot of people now.
Yeah.
Well, there's that, and let's not forget, they get thrusted back into this world, back into this body, where the body screams about me.
Yeah.
And pain.
It screams about me.
Yeah.
It doesn't care about you out there. It doesn't care about this. It cares about itself. Yeah, and so once again, they are fighting that war between the spirit and the flesh. And it's easy for them to get lost into it again, just like we do. Except the problem is, they know what's on the other side because they've been there. And it becomes even more of an irritant to them. At least this is my view and my opinion.
Well, yeah, you're in this body. It'd be very frustrating.
The one person that I talked to, one of the people I talked to with an NDE, is a dear old lady. And when I asked her to describe Jesus, because she said she saw Jesus, I said it was like he was pure light. But I could see the color of his hair. I could see his beard. I could see his face. But I can't describe it to you because there's nothing to describe. And I said, well, what else was heaven like? She started crying. She said, you don't understand. The sky is so blue that there is not a color blue that represents it here.
Right.
The ground is so vibrant with life that there's nothing I can give you to describe it. And I'm talking about a woman that had been around at that time 70 years. She had a lot she could draw from for description.
Yeah, he fails.
And she's like, there is nothing there here in this world that will describe that world.
One thing Smitty and Karen both said I thought was remarkable, you just triggered my mind on this, was that light doesn't come from, like, how the sun hits
like
things,
sun,
or a
yeah.
light bulb
It's just
hits things and reflects off.
it's
Is
everywhere.
that light comes out of the very things you're observing, as opposed to being a reflected a surface, which is very interesting. I remember hearing that from both of them. I thought that was very unique.
That's
that
something
everything
she basically said.
has its own light.
So be light.
Well, and
Aren't we to be light to the world? Aren't we to be light? So everything's light.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think that we've.
One of the most watched TED Talks of all time is Jill Taylor, who's a brain scientist. Mm-hmm. She dissects brains, and she got into that because of her brother had a particular disease. But it's an amazing TED Talk, and here's a total atheist. Well, not saying atheist. She was, let's say, agnostic, more or less. But she was a scientist through and through. And she has a stroke. And it's worth watching the TED Talk on
I think I may have seen that one.
Jill Taylor's insight, because you think on a platform like TED Talks it wouldn't be so big, but it is. It's one of the top 10. It vacillates between second to fifth all the time of all time. And she has this stroke, and she realizes when you leave your brain, and she says this is hard for her to explain, but when you leave your brain puts everything together. Like, how do you know where the table is, where your hand is, these kinds of things. Your brain does a lot. It's a tool. And when you remove that, all of a sudden you're one with the universe, and you're far bigger than your body. And it's really strange, but watch it. And she explains it far better than I do.
I think I did see that one.
But it's amazing that you find a person who's a scientist that comes right out and says that our consciousness exceeds our body by a huge margin. And she said when she had to fit back into her body, it was very difficult because she was so huge. And
that's why babies cry a lot when they're first born, because they got this giant spirit trapped in this little tiny thing, and it's uncomfortable.
Hey, you laugh. I think there's some truth to that. All right.
Well, I guess we're going to wrap up this episode of Across the Cosmos. So, for
Lou Rogers,
Mark Wilson,
and David Cameron,
I am Chase Rockwell, and bidding you so long until the next time you find yourself across the cosmos.
Send any questions or comments to us via email at info@acrossthecosmos.com. Also, visit us on the web at www.acrossthecosmos.com for show updates, news, and other important information. No part of this podcast may be used without the express written permission from the staff of Across the Cosmos. Across the Cosmos is a production of Omite Corporation. Copyright 2015.